Um, Million things to cover. Starting from obviously, yeah, fueling around training, which is kind of the biggest topic which we're going to focus on. We can go into muscle growth. We can go to supplements. There's yeah, a lot of stuff that we can go through. But I've picked out what I think is probably most appropriate. What I probably see most people get wrong with their nutrition. And then in future sessions, we can go into a bit more depth potentially about other areas. But anyway, regardless, yeah, let's keep this fun and interesting. I guess a little bit about me is I really like food, which really helps being a nutritionist. So yeah, I'm definitely one of those nutritionists that promotes eating lots of great food, not shying away from anything like foods to be enjoyed. It acts as fuel, but it also acts as yeah, enjoyment, social, all those other elements to do with nutrition. So it's not just about macros and hitting the protein target. I do a few different sports. I quite like my cycling, sort of got into my triathlons recently, played hockey madly. This is probably about that was over 10 years ago now. I did 5 marathons, 5 days for charity. Little cool fact for you. That was actually before I knew anything about nutrition, so it probably would have been a little bit easier had I known that now. And love cooking. So these are just some of the things that I tend to try and make at my household. And the most important question that you're all waiting to hear is pineapple does belong in pizza, in my opinion. It's one of your 5 a day if you want to justify that. Yeah, I guess a bit about me, and then more from a professional point of view. I am a performance nutritionist, and I sit on something called the SENR, so the Sport and Exercise Nutrition Register. And basically, you need to have like a postgraduate degree. So I've got a master's within sports nutrition, and then I'm actually the practitioner registrant, which is I've got a fair amount of experience now, sort of 5+ years, submit a portfolio and stuff. So I'm not just a columnist out of the Daily Mail who knows a little bit about nutrition. Okay, so actually trusted by quite a few different clubs. This is kind of the CV. At the moment, the three at the bottom are where I work. So I work at Surrey with jockeys based in Newmarket and with the English Cricket Board as well. And I have previously worked a lot of football with Ipswich Spurs and Southampton. So I like to think I've got a fair amount of experience. So hopefully you can trust me, basically, is what I'm trying to get you to do. So to sell nutrition to you a little bit, I'm just going to try and let someone in here. Oh, I can't. 1 second. There we go. Um, yeah, to sell nutrition to you, how many times over the next 12 months do you think you'll train? Like whether that's gym-based sessions and skill-based sessions or anything like that. Anyone got an answer for me?
Like nearly every day, isn't it? It's three. If there's 365, you guys will probably be training 250 of them, maybe.
Yeah, good, close. I mean, it's going to vary again for everybody, and this is one thing that we'll talk about is how individual it is. But say we do 4 sessions a week, and we give ourselves a couple of weeks off. Let's say that's 200 sessions over a whole year. Okay. Now the next good one is how many times will you eat in 12 months? Anyone got any quick maths they can work it out?
1,500 times.
Yeah, good shout. And again, it depends what you classify as a meal or anything like that, or but let's say we have 5 feeds without trying to make you sound like animals. But let's say it's 3 meals, 2 snacks every day. That is 1,825 feeding opportunities over a 12-month period. Okay, so why am I getting you to think about these numbers? Well, but what I tend to see is people have no issues putting their effort in with the training and turning up to training and doing that. But it's actually what they do away from that. You've got way more opportunity to have an impact on your performance, on your fueling, or your recovery and everything if we get the nutrition right. Because actually, that's 1,800 chances to improve that, which is what I say. So that is 1,825 opportunities potentially to recover, repair, refuel. Now, I don't expect every single one of those meals to be supporting you towards your goals, but yeah, can the majority of them be helping you there? And there is a huge opportunity there compared to what we do with the training. So we're doing that bit, but can we do the rest of it? Good. First thing I want to talk about is myth busting. Hopefully, if anyone's a 90s kid, they get the reference. Maybe not, might be lost on you. But here are some of the things that I think are quite prominent in the, I guess, social media at the moment, and I hear a lot about them. And I guess the difficulty with being a nutritionist is that everyone has an opinion and thinks that they are right because it worked for them. But I'm going to tell you what a nutritionist actually thinks. So. A bit of a myth for me is fasting. So, people think it's like the best thing since sliced bread. It might work for some people, and again, this is the thing with nutrition, is that what works for you doesn't necessarily work for others. So if you do it and you feel great, crack on. But particularly from a performance point of view, I really don't like it. Okay, so they've done a few studies basically where they looked at the omission of breakfast, so the skipping of breakfast and the impact in subsequent evening performance. They did it in rowing there, and they did it in cycling, and yeah, despite eating essentially the same amount of calories throughout the day and the same amount of energy, the performance was dropped, and that's all because they were fasting in the morning. So it can be a useful tool potentially if we're trying to create a calorie deficit for fat loss, but that's really the only time that I'd be recommending it. Um, we should be avoiding all glucose spikes. I don't know if anyone's seen much about the Zoe program and about CGM, so continuous glucose monitors. People obviously put the patch on and it'll pair up with their phone and it tells you what your blood glucose is basically. But there's a lot of issues with it in that we'll start with just a couple of them, but it doesn't actually tell you how much fuel you've got in your system. So your blood glucose is kind of quite heavily regulated. It doesn't actually tell you how much glycogen and fuel is in your uh, liver and your muscles. It doesn't consider other elements of meals. So a lot of people worry about blood sugar spiking after, say, they have, I don't know, one potato, but who actually just eats a potato on its own? We don't take into consideration the protein element of it or the veg that you might put with it as well. I think it leads to really restrictive and dangerous, almost harmful behaviors where we're restricting the foods that we're having because we're worried about our glucose spikes. And I think the most baffling thing or most exciting thing about it is you could have exactly the same meal, say at the same time, and you'd get completely different blood glucose responses based on your stress that day, your training that day, your sleep that night before. All really impacts your blood glucose regulation. So yeah, it's pretty rubbish, I think, for most people. Unless you're diabetic, then it's really important. Um, Good. Greens powders. Don't know if anyone uses any greens powders. You've got AG1 here, for example. Sadly, this is £80 a month. If anyone's taking that, I would say save your money. Um, Greens powders are pretty much, yeah, just a really expensive multivitamin. If your diet is really good or like relatively good, it doesn't really have any effect. Okay, so the reason why I put only if the day needs saving. So if your diet is really, really poor, greens powders might have a place to play, but typically most people don't need to worry about them. And avoiding all processed foods. So, yeah, it's a huge argument at the moment, and there's quite a few books out about it. But what I'd argue is it all comes down to context. So I like people being more aware of the types of foods they're having, where it's coming from. But every food can sometimes be a tool in the right circumstance. So these foods on here, you'd probably define as, well, they are heavily processed. Okay, but actually Cheerios can make a really good like high fuel snack before going into a training session. Obviously, Lucozade Sport, really, really useful. And Haribo, like Haribo is used on the Tour de France as a recovery tool to make sure that they refuel as quickly as they can. Because one, it tastes great, it's cheerful, they've got no issues eating it, but it's also packed full of glucose, obviously, to support their refuel. Good. And then last one is all about protein gimmicks. So you'll often find if you walk around the supermarket at the moment, you will see everything's got protein slapped on it. Even I think even once I came across a chicken breast that said high in protein, which is quite phenomenal. Um, but a lot of them only have maybe like 1 gram extra protein compared to the original product. I'm pretty sure I remember the Weetabix protein maybe had 1.52 grams more protein in compared to the regular products, yet you'll probably pay more. And in fact, all three of these items actually have less protein in than a bagel, which again, pretty astonishing. So no one slaps high protein on bagels. Well, they probably have actually, but I haven't seen it yet. So protein, stick to the sources that we know. And don't worry about topping up your protein necessarily from these sort of fortified snacks that don't actually have that much protein in it. So just to give you like a quick tool, so I've called it the Ollie social media screening as to who to know, who to follow, who to listen to. If they do any of these things, selling a product that sounds too good to be true, easing off a chopping board, are they blaming one type of food or saying it's as simple as calories in, calories out? I'll probably just say don't follow them. Okay. Nutrition's really, really complicated. And even in this session, I'm going to try and give you like an idea of how many different contexts there can be. So I don't know any of you and any of your situations, circumstances, or yeah, how much you weigh, how old you are, what sport you're doing. There's lots of factors to consider here. And if anyone says nutrition is really simple, then these are all the factors that can influence your energy intake. There's tons. It's ridiculous. Okay, so it's never as easy as making sure you just eat the right amount or eat less than you're burning. Okay, it's pretty tough to even calculate. Um, okay, regardless, that's kind of my introduction to nutrition there, without actually really talking about any food. So we're going to go into the next theme, which is fueling with intent. So how to elevate your training, and it all comes down to one thing really, and that is carbohydrate. Okay, so what do you really need to fuel your training? It always comes down to carbohydrates typically. Okay, so most people are pretty good at and aware of yeah, protein and getting the protein in and trying to think about focus on the protein goals. I think that gets almost too much attention. People don't pay enough attention to carbohydrates. Okay, so these are just some example ones. I'm not saying that everyone has to go out and get a box of Wheatos, although I would say they're probably one of the best cereals out there. Um, but why do we need carbohydrate? Well, if you look at this graph, you'll see basically along the bottom there, that's the exercise intensity, so your heart rate max, the percentage of your heart rate max. And then on the other axis, the y-axis, we're looking at how much contribution to total energy comes from either fat or carbohydrate. And basically, if you follow the blue line, you'll see that as your heart rate increases, your requirement for carbohydrate as a fuel source increases significantly as well. So right now we're probably in that low bar, so the red bar where we're predominantly using fat as our fuel source. But I can guarantee that any exercise that you're doing, unless you're perhaps a darts player, you'll probably be doing around 60+% of your heart rate max. So all you're using to fuel your training, whatever that might be, is carbohydrate. Okay, so we need to think about how we can get enough carbs onto our plate and through our diet to support that training. Okay. I think we're past the days of demonizing carbohydrate and being really anti-carbohydrate. So hopefully you can embrace this new high carb lifestyle with me. Um, so one of the first things I always get athletes to think about is what their week looks like. So people often get stuck in the same habits day to day. So it can be a really useful thing because say if we've got a really good breakfast nailed down and we tick that off, that's awesome. But my question would be if you were driving to Edinburgh or if you were driving to Ipswich, would you put the same amount of fuel in your tank for both those journeys? And the answer is no. So we should really be eating different things each day to fuel us for that day. So you need to identify what days require low fuel, moderate fuel, or high fuel. And this is just kind of how we work in with the athletes that I work with, to try and how we separate this across the week. So you might say, for example, your low fuel day would be, yeah, a rest day, an off day, whereas your moderate fuel might be a single training day or a light run or something like that. Whereas your high fuel day might be, say, a long run at the weekend or a double training day where we might be doing double strength sessions or anything like that. So again, the amount of food that we eat on a red day, a low day, should be considerably different to what we eat on a high day. Okay, so this is where I tend to see a lot of people going, interesting, because people have never really thought about their food like this before. And it doesn't mean you've got to complicate it by suddenly adding loads of different meals or getting up at 4 a.m. to prep breakfast. It can basically mean probably taking what you're already having, say, that, for example, we're having eggs on toast and adding an extra slice of toast and a glass of orange juice onto that breakfast, and then that gives you like a high fuel breakfast. So we haven't necessarily, yeah, as I say, got to tweak the options too much. It's more about the quantities. Okay. Um, so I kind of just went through this, but what kind of days would this be appropriate for? Things like this. So if we were running, let's say we're a runner, then we're looking at yeah mobility off days, short runs, tempo runs for the sort of amber moderate one, and then long runs or multiple training sessions for the green. Okay, so try your best to like put that into the context of your own training schedule. So you're all going to look completely different, as I say, and I'll take answers at the end if anyone's unsure. But think, how could you categorize your week into this sort of red, amber, green? Okay. And then what we would do is that we would think about the amount of carbohydrate that we would have on those days to support that. So half your regular portion of carbs on the red day. So that's how we create sort of the equilibrium. So that allows us to have these really big high carbohydrate days to fuel the big days, is by dropping down a little bit on the red days, and then your amber is what we'd call normal carb portions. Okay, so hopefully this is making some sense. I know this isn't really too specific, but like to give you some examples, like a red day breakfast might be something like an omelette with avocado and some fruit, or something like egg based. So quite high fat, high protein, low carb. A regular breakfast could be, yeah, this is probably most people's go-to or similar, is sort of two slices of toast with eggs. And we might have some color in there with some avocado and tomatoes. However, if we're having a big training day, we'd probably switch that up to a higher carb focus where we're looking at oats, porridge, dates, banana, and orange juice. So just varying that. Or if you want to keep it on the same theme of sort of the eggs, you might just go for an extra slice of toast with, say, a banana and peanut butter on there on the side. So we're just bolting that on top of your regular breakfast because we know it's a big training day. Um, and then if we moved on to lunches, for example, it's a really simple thing. We haven't necessarily got to change what we're having. We're just thinking about your portion sizes. So if we take our lunch into work, and we normally have, yeah, for example, I don't know, half a pack of microwave rice with some leftovers. If we know that's a double training day or we're leading into a big training day the day after, any of those situations where we've got a big session that evening, we might have the whole pack of rice, for example. So just like small little tweaks across the day can really add up from like a fueling point of view. And that means that you're leading into your next session really well fueled. Good. Has anyone got any questions, by the way? I hope no one's put anything in the text box because I can't see it. Someone will have to shout out if you have. Oh, here we go. No, no messages. We're all good. But yeah, shout out if anyone's got any
Sorry,
questions.
yeah,
Good.
just a quick question. So when you're increasing the carbohydrate, are you
Yeah,
still keeping the calories or just also increasing calories as well as carbohydrate? Is it percentages?
a little bit. So we don't, without complicating it, we don't tend to work in percentages too much because it's kind of relative. Like I could tell you, okay, have 50% of your plate to be carbohydrate, but if that plate is only 200 calories, you're still under fueling quite considerably. So we tend to work it out based on your body weight. So, for example, a really high carb breakfast, which would have in like a, say, if we're running a half marathon that day, would have 1.5 grams per kilogram of body weight. Um, Across the day, that might work out as like 6 grams per kilogram body weight, but I'd try not to confuse you too much. All I'd say is, yeah, the calories will increase a little bit, but we'll also drop the fat content quite a lot on that day as well. So we probably would pull away from things like we might not have salmon on that day, for example. We might have less nuts on that day because we're focusing more on the carbohydrate, and also because fat content takes quite a while to break down, so it sits in the stomach and the in our gastro for a long time. We don't want that causing upset when we're exercising, basically. So drop the fat, calories come up a little bit, but carbs come up quite a lot, if that
Okay,
makes
thank
sense.
you.
No worries. Anyone else got any questions?
Yeah, Ollie,
Yeah.
what you just explained there, was that in terms of like athletes and things like that? I was just wondering how you would go about doing that with, say, a client like somebody I would train who's probably wanting to lose weight, how you would sort of calculate the calories for them. Would that be a good idea to implement that with them in their training to sort of help them so you're not getting so fatigued on your training days?
Yeah, I still think it's really important to make sure they're eating more on a training day, essentially. So
Hmm.
you still periodize it across the week. You'd still obviously want to keep your calorie deficit. So maybe
Yeah.
you the way I've done it with many people in the past is you probably look at the hardest days at being calorie maintenance, essentially,
Yeah,
and you balance, and then you'd create the deficit on the other days.
on the other days and on the rest
That
day.
way it doesn't impact their training, and yeah, they feel better and can get better results from their training as well. It is always about what works for them. They might find that they having a consistent calorie deficit across the day is really easy to sustain, rather than
Hmm.
start playing around with it a little bit. They might have to think
Yeah.
more about their food, and they might drop off from an adherence point of view. So it could just be that you introduce more of a one pre-training snack on those harder days, which could only be, I don't know, 300 calories extra compared to other days, and it's just one extra food that they're having or one extra little meal that they're having, rather than trying to complicate the whole day. If that makes sense.
Okay, yeah, because I just wondered about how you do sort of go about the calculations. Obviously, we've got our calculators on the app, which goes in and does sort of your building muscle or your weight loss. I didn't know how they would calculate that, or if there's a simple way for you to do it yourself.
There's quite a few calculators online, to be fair. I could send one across, but
Oh
you
yeah, that'd be good.
should really, the hard thing about it is it probably generalize for the whole week. So you'd probably set
Yeah,
an activity level, yeah, and then it will churn out a number. How I do it personally is I break it down day by day. So you can work out something called METs, which is the metabolic equivalent of task. So say if they're in the gym for 60 minutes, we would take their BMR, add on a sort of physical activity level to do with their job, and then we'd put on almost like their exercise calorie requirements on top of that. So we're trying to specifically work out each day, rather than making it generic across the week. And
yeah,
that's when nutrition gets complicated and difficult.
yeah. It's the calculations. There's so many different ones, isn't there?
But don't forget that they're just equations, they're just
Yeah.
estimations. So like I wouldn't get too caught up in it because honestly you can go down
Okay.
a rabbit hole trying
Yeah.
to make the perfect amount of calories and be like, this is it. And then it
Yeah.
actually,
Going for a range as such rather than an actual
yeah,
set target. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Cool, great questions, thanks. So yeah, just I guess back to sort of the carbohydrate. Why do we want to be eating more carbohydrate on those harder days? I think obviously it's probably quite obvious, but the main reasons or benefits that I see is basically you recover quicker between sessions. So actually, not only is the initial performance better in that session, but the next session will also be better because the recovery process would have started earlier. Training performance within that session is always a lot higher, whether that's actually from a sort of cognitive decision-making point of view, or whether that's actually from almost like a physical output point of view. Improved body composition, you'll find adherence is better or energy outputs are higher because of the correct fueling. Increased muscle development, which is sort of linked in with the quality of the training session. And yeah, all those benefits there. And what I'd say is that you're already doing the hard bit by turning up to the training and putting yourself through it. Now, if you can fuel it correctly, you'll get way more out of it. So just have a little time to focus on what we're eating around our sessions. So to give you some guidance, because yeah, it's all good talking about the theory and the kind of the yeah things that I see people going wrong. This is just a way you might structure it. Okay, so again, there's many of you in the room that will probably have loads of different dietary preferences, food you don't like, and a million different yeah, sort of training schedules. But if we put up a generic one here, where say we're going for a run in the morning, we're doing some AM training, doesn't necessarily have to be a run, and it's quite a hard session. We're saying probably 60 minutes of pretty intense work. What I'd probably always say is to have a pre-training snack. Um, Now, if it's a lighter session, under an hour, you could probably get away with it. Okay, but if performance is the goal, where we actually want to try and hit good paces, trying to lift heavy, I'd always say eat something. And that could be as simple as a cereal bar, that could be bagel, that could be a crumpet. Okay, and try and make it as easy as possible because obviously morning sessions tend to be really early in the morning. We don't want to again be cooking at 5 a.m. ahead of our session. We also want it to be really easy to digest. Hence why things like, yeah, bagel, crumpets, we're using jams, we're using honeys because they digest really quickly and really easily, don't cause any stomach upset. Okay. So I'd probably try and have that about 30 minutes before, or maybe just on your way to the session, for example. And then we would have your typical breakfast after that. So we just look to recover with a good hearty high protein breakfast. So scrambled egg, toast, avocado, coffee. Lunch, these are just some ideas. You can make them a lot more glamorous than this, but for example, we've got a protein source in there. We've got quite a good carbohydrate source in there, and we've got some vegetables in there. And what I call this first half of the day is like this is your fueling window. So we're trying to fuel beforehand and we're trying to refuel afterwards. Okay. But as we move away from almost the training session, this is when we might look to drop the carbohydrate down a little bit. Now, what's really interesting is you'll find most people will have their biggest meal of the day in the evening, regardless of what they've done the rest of the day. So sometimes that can be great because if you've worked out in the evening and then your dinner is sort of like your recovery meal, you want a big meal. But if you worked out really hard in the morning, but then we eat very minimal for sort of breakfast, lunch, and then have a big dinner, we're almost having that 12 hours after that training session. So why would we not try and sort of partition that a little bit better and distribute it better across the day so that we've got it close to that session so that we can refuel and recover quicker by, say, having a bigger lunch or having a bigger breakfast, which is close to that training session. If that makes sense. We've got the afternoon snack in there. It's like a little protein hit. We could put some fruit in there if we wanted. And then, as you see, the dinner is a little bit lower carbohydrate compared to the other meals because that's further away from our training session. Obviously, it gets a little bit more complicated when if we're training again the next day. We'd probably look to have another high carbohydrate meal if we're going again the next morning, or depending on the context of that training session. Okay, so that's for you to work out whether it's a hard one which you need to fuel up for, or whether it's a sort of relatively easy session which you don't necessarily need loads of fuel to get through. And then a really good general recommendation is always like yogurt and berries before bed. So a really good quality Greek yogurt, really high protein, berries to help antioxidants to help muscle soreness and muscle recovery. Great thing to do. And then to give you an idea of a PM training session, again, this is just foods I've thrown out here. It's not to say that these are superior to any others, but it's just guidance. So, yeah, if we've got a really busy morning, for example, we might make a smoothie. So we've got milk, berries, banana, oats, whey protein in there. It ticks all the boxes. I love smoothies because they hydrate you, they give you fuel, they give you protein. And then mid-morning snack, again, might be like a protein yogurt banana. And then as we enter or get close to this fueling window, we start thinking about, okay, now it's time to start getting some carbohydrate into the system. So we might go for a bit of a higher carb lunch option. So we've gone for a stir fry here. It could be leftovers from the night before. It doesn't have to be prawns. It could be chicken. It could be tofu. It could be anything. But yeah, higher carb than your typical probably lunches, which might be like eggs or beans on toast. Introduce a pre-training snack. So we might have a bowl of cereal in there. We might have a protein shake to accompany that to make sure that we're hitting our protein goals. It could be a hot cross bun at the moment, for example, always a winner. A bit of jam on there. So we're looking at around 40, 50 grams of carbohydrate. Um, and then we've got our session. And then after our session, we'd probably have our dinner or our evening meal. And again, we're trying to make that relatively high carbohydrate. So you can see we've got a pack of rice there. And again, this is going to vary considerably depending on whether you weigh 50 kilos or whether you weigh 90 kilos. So it's pretty hard to give you all information that's appropriate to you, but hopefully you can kind of gauge how I'm trying to get you to focus on fueling at the right time of the day, and starting to think about the foods that you're introducing into your day at those key times to support your training. Good. Any questions on those timelines, actually? Sorry, I shouldn't have done that because now I have to go through it all again. Any questions?
I train at 5 o'clock in the morning. I have a lot of digestive problems, a lot of stomach problems, full stop. What is the best thing for me to have? Because we literally get up and go down the gym. And funny enough, we just had a nutritionist a couple of weeks ago who actually advised me to train fasted.
Okay, interesting.
I wonder what your views are on that, just because of my age. I'm 44 and celiac, dairy-free, blah, blah, blah. She recommended funny enough, the 16-hour fasting that you were saying was a load of nonsense, which wouldn't suit me anyway. But I just wonder what your thoughts were and what would be.
What was the rationale behind the fasting?
Just with my digestive system, I think trying to reduce my inflammation and all that because of the celiac IBS. I can't eat dairy either, so I'm really.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously a few considerations there.
Yeah.
Look, all I would say is that you are your own biggest experiment. So
Yeah.
I think it's down for you to trial different things, try and make a note of it, try and keep a symptom diary,
Yeah.
see how you feel best, see what works for you. Rather than I don't think it's too difficult to say I'll do this because of definite research or anything. So if you find that you struggle with energy in the mornings or you're flagging towards the end of a session or you get more out of your session, then I'd potentially look at something which is like a little glass of orange juice. It could be it's kind of whatever you think you could stomach at that point. That won't any issues with you, basically.
I did hour of resistance training, so sort of strength training as such. So
you probably could get away with it. It all depends on how you feel. If you have maybe slightly more carbohydrate the night before, that will still be stored in your muscles and your liver, ready to go for the morning. What we do overnight is we lose our liver glycogen because we need that to keep it alive. So why we have a pre-training stack is to top that up a little bit. So you could play around with that. You could play around with fasting. As I say, I think just keep a track of how you feel best and
Okay.
into that. Um, great. And
Okay.
then sorry, was that another question?
No, no,
I've,
no.
Okay,
I've got a question, Ollie.
go on. Yeah.
So I tend to train after dinner because I've got to sort the family out.
Mm.
So how, what would be something that would be sort of maybe, how long should I wait after dinner, roughly? Should I have a smaller dinner and then sort of almost split it with the evening snack? Is there a better way to do it? So say I need to eat around 6 and then I train after that at 7.
Mm.
What sort of setup would I be looking at for that, do you think, to
Yeah,
optimally fuel?
great question. I think first of all, some people can train having eaten a Vindaloo 15 minutes before and absolutely fine with it from like a stomach point of view. So if you are one of those people, yeah, you've lucked out. So like if you find you can have a good meal beforehand and that doesn't impact you, I'd probably say an hour and a half is like a good amount of time where you've probably digested some of it. We've got a bit of protein and carbs being broken down and fueling that session. I really like the idea of potentially splitting it into almost like two evenly sized meals. So you kind of have like a small to
Yeah.
medium portion beforehand, and then you've got another small medium portion afterwards. Um, or yeah, you have your big meal before you train, and then you'd almost have like a kind of like recovery based snack afterwards. So that might be like yogurt, granola, berries, and that'd be like your late night when you get in sort of recovery bit there. So any of those would work. Like even what you're doing potentially does work,
Mm.
providing you feel well fueled and it's not impacting your performance because we're digesting the food. So I think the only things you've got to weigh up is we get a lot of blood shunted to the gut when we have a big meal, so it might make you like a little bit lethargic and a bit tired and sleepy. If
Mm.
you think that is having an effect and therefore is impacting the quality of the session, maybe reduce the portion size down a little bit, and then you could have the rest when you get in.
Yeah. Okay.
Um,
Thanks.
Again, sort of play around with it. This is the fun
Yeah.
thing about nutrition. It's about what works for you. Um, cool. And then just to give you some more ideas about those sort of pre-training snacks, what the kind of things we're looking for. Well, we want them to be really easily digestible, between 20 and 40 grams of carbs, and ideally portable as well. So great to have some potentially stacked away in your car, in your bag. So if you have got a dart between places or dart to the gym after work, you've got something that's ready to go. So yeah, things like Soaring are awesome. You've got Belvita, Squares bars, all like pretty easy to eat. Just a little top up there. Um, and yeah, I guess I always get questioned about, oh, aren't these foods like really bad for you? And you have to again remember that there's a purpose towards it, and having one Belvita doesn't suddenly make your diet poor. Your diet is your overall intake over years of food, really, isn't it? So having that one tiny, I guess, relatively high sugar snack, but with purpose, is not going to do any harm to you whatsoever. So now is not the time, 30 minutes before a training session, to be eating a quinoa bowl. That'll probably sit pretty heavy. So we need to think about what's appropriate in that situation. And again, we don't necessarily need a pre-training snack for every session. These are the big sessions which we really want to fuel and we really want to perform well in. That's the ones to be having. Um, Forbidden four foods to avoid around training. So this isn't general. We obviously want these foods typically in the diet, but again, this is when that performance versus health kind of argument comes in. We want to avoid foods that are high in fat, so things like nuts, avocado. I'm talking within an hour and a half of training potentially. If you are someone that suffers with like a slower digestion and really notice it, you probably want to give yourself even more time. High fiber foods, things like quinoa, brown rice. Again, only because everything takes so long to digest, and this is why they're so useful day to day. But ultimately, we want to get food digested really quickly and into the bloodstream and then into the muscles so that we can actually use it during that session. Whereas we don't want it just sitting there in your gut trying to digest whilst we're trying to, blow out with a Metcon session or anything like that. So they're the four kind of types of foods that I'll be avoiding close to training. If it's 5 hours plus away, you're absolutely fine with them. And then the great question of, do you need to eat something or drink a protein shake straight after training? I would say if you're eating a main meal, so whether that's a lunch, a breakfast, or a dinner, as like your recovery meal, which I basically highly encourage everyone to try and facilitate their training to come around their meal times, then it's unlikely you really need to eat anything. The only time I would say you do is if we're either training again later that day, or I don't know, we're doing a back-to-back competition where we have to compete again the next day, and refueling is the highest priority. Okay, so there's only a few circumstances where you need to eat something straight away after training if we're having a meal within an hour or around an hour. If it's going to be longer than that, say if we need to drive home for an hour, then we're showering and then we're cooking, and in reality it's going to be 2 to 3 hours until we're actually eating, I'd probably say, yeah, it's pretty useful to have something. And that's when things like a protein shake could be really useful. So milk-based with whey. And to give you some idea of some other options, I'd probably say grab one protein option and one carbohydrate option if, yeah, we're not going to be eating a main meal for a considerable amount of time. So that could be, yeah, protein yogurt pouch. That could be something as simple as some chocolate milk. That could be a protein shake that you've made. Beef jerky, anything like that. Beef jerky is a great option. And then pick a carbohydrate option to pair with it as well. Okay, and then just the last theme, just because this came up, is structuring your match day. I could literally take an hour, if not more, going through this. So this is gonna be very, very quick. And hopefully some of you will watch Dodgeball. Um, Yeah, so just to give you an idea of like the timings and the types of foods that we'd be eating, let's say we have a competition at 2 to 3 p.m. And again, it's so hard to do this because some of you could be, I don't know, doing shot put, some of you could be running a marathon. So it's impossible to gauge this, but I'll talk you through it and hopefully that will help you. But we'd probably go through your typical sort of breakfast timings, but then what we would look to have is your pre-match meal or pre-competition meal at around 3 hours or 3 to 4 hours before competition. Okay, and that gives it plenty of time to digest, as I say, to get into the muscle so we can actually use it and to almost clear the digestive tract so that we're not digesting food whilst we're trying to perform. So always think, when do I need to be performing? 3 hours before that needs to be my last big meal, really. Okay. And then again, we'd look to have one of these snack options sort of 30, 45 minutes beforehand. So how does that look? Well, again, that could be like a high carb focused breakfast where we might have porridge, we might put a bit of skyr in there, so we've got a bit of protein. We do always want a little bit of protein throughout like a competition day, and that's mainly just to regulate your appetite. Otherwise, we might get a bit hungry. We've added some crumpets in there for an extra little carbohydrate hit. And then your pre-competition meal will be obviously sort of carbohydrate focused, and we try and keep it quite simple. We don't want loads of like flavor. We don't want spice. We don't want any high fat foods in there. We probably wouldn't have much veg or anything. Okay, we'll just keep it focused at the task in hand of having quite a lot of carbohydrate, and then one of those pre-match snacks there. And then a whole nother topic again is to have what to have during competition. But quick example, you might have things like dried mango, banana. You might use some sweets. We might use some gels. Okay. Um, so I guess the biggest takeaway from this is try and think 3 hours before my competition event is sort of the last time to be having a big meal. If that is a, say, midday event, so 12 p.m. start, how would we change anything? We'd probably remove that pre-match meal and have a slightly larger breakfast. So I've added in a smoothie there. You might have another crumpet, for example, but we obviously don't need to be forcing down any rice or pasta, yeah, 2 hours before we play. If we've fueled well at breakfast and potentially fueled well the night before, you'll be absolutely fine. Okay, so yeah, depending on the context of this situation and what your sport is. Yeah, that was a very, very quick overview of competition timelines there, but hopefully that might have helped some of you there.
May I just ask,
Oh, yeah,
what about if your race start at sort of 6, 7, 8 in the morning?
yeah, not fun. Sadly you have to get up early-ish. Yeah, I did a half Ironman last year and I had to get up at 3 a.m. So it might have even been earlier than that to get the breakfast in. So I guess it's depending on what race you're doing. If it is like a big endurance event, you can do a lot of the work the day before, the 24 hours, the 36 hours leading into it. So we can load, we can fuel, and that means that the requirement for breakfast is not as important. So we don't have to have such a big breakfast at that 3 a.m. time. Okay, but all I'd say is just make it really easy. So things like cereals, bagels, like tends to be quite easy to eat. You don't have to be forcing in things like porridge. You don't have to be having eggs on toast or anything. Just keep it really, really simple so that yeah, you can kind of wake up, get it in you. Juices will really help you there. So like fruit juices, smoothies. But it doesn't have to be quite as big if we've done the work before that. Does that help
Okay,
at all?
thank you. Yeah, thanks.
No worries. Yeah, so I got fired over some questions. Just thought I'd stick them on here and then go through them very briefly. Some of them are really good. So, what's the best solution at breakfast time for someone who will often skip it and then forget to eat anything throughout the morning? Um, so a few things here. I would say always have backup options. So if you know that if you're realistic with yourself and you know you're probably going to miss some breakfast throughout the week, can we have any snack options in the car? Can we have some backup options at work? Can we grab something on the move? So we've always got like a plan B, but also we want a plan A there. So um, can we have a smoothie? Can we take a smoothie with us? Can we make it the night before? Can we sip on it throughout the morning so it doesn't necessarily feel like we're having to eat anything, but you can get loads of good nutrition into a smoothie. That would probably be my best recommendation there. Other than that, just having those plan B options. So being realistic with yourself and control your environment and make sure that there's plenty of options around you so that you can snack on things throughout the morning if you have forgotten your breakfast. I mean, I've kind of been through this sort of advice for match day -1. We want loads of carbohydrate. We want to drop the fat. We want to drop the protein, bring up the carbohydrate. Biggest thing for me is that if we are loading the day before a competition, is spread it out across the whole day. Don't wait till it's the evening time to absolutely stuff your face and feel horribly full and heavy before we go to bed and probably suffer from your sleep for it. Really, really try and spread that out. Okay, loading can take all day, 36 hours if we need it to. We can really spread that out. Um, Supplementation advice to aid sleep. There isn't really that great research out there, so a lot of this is very subjective. So depending on what works for you, as with most things in nutrition. Potential things that might work are things like called tart cherry. So it's like a really concentrated cherry. You can get them in like sachets, or you can get big bottles of it, and you'd have a shot of that before, sort of like an hour before you go to bed. Um, Kiwis, there was actually a study that had a look at 2 kiwis sort of an hour before bed, and that looked to improve sleep. Um, Foods high in tryptophan, so being aware of that, so things like nuts, some poultry and things can help support that. And then there are some weak evidence of things like magnesium, but I would never actually tell people to buy it. It's up to you whether you want to give that a go and improve it. But I'd say there's a lot more around sleep hygiene and the way you approach sleep before supplementation comes into it. I've seen I've got a question. Oh, no worries. Thank you. Advice on caffeine recommendations and whether or not performance nutrition would recommend energy drinks. Caffeine can be your best friend if used correctly. Really, really potent, particularly when we're under fatigue. Um, yes, I'd be recommending caffeine products. Doesn't necessarily have to be an energy drink. Okay, so an energy drink can actually work. So, for example, Monster I think has 200 milligrams of caffeine, which is quite a good amount, sort of like 2 coffees. It also has loads of other stuff in it as well. If used with the purpose of improving performance and taken at the right time, energy drinks can be pretty effective. But you can also get caffeine shots, you can get caffeine pills, you can get caffeine gum, you can get caffeine gels. You can get all sorts of different caffeine products, which probably would be a bit better. So yes, I would say take it, trial it in training first, and you want to build up to between 3 to 6 milligrams per kilogram of your body weight, so you can work out exactly how much you need. The bigger the individual, the more caffeine they need. But that supplementation would be a whole session by itself. I'm just going to leave that one there. We don't need to get our advice from Eddie Abu. No further words needed. He's a clown. And creatine supplementation and recommendations for all athletes. Yeah, pretty much I'd recommend it for everyone from both a health and a performance point of view. So got loads of like brain benefits, and it's got loads of muscle building benefits as well. It helps to really improve the quality of your training sessions, and really good for anyone who does anything repeated sprints wise. So anything stop start or intermittent, and then we can recover really quickly between those sprints with it. So easiest thing is just 5 grams per day. Remember to try and have it every day. That's probably the most important thing. So don't worry too much about what time you have it during the day, whether that's morning, post-workout. As long as you're taking it every day, 5 grams, that's perfect. And then basically after about a month, you reach your saturation point, and that's when you get all the benefits basically. So it's not one of those ones you take before a session, you get a benefit. You won't notice that. It gradually builds up in your body and reach the saturation point, which way we want to get to. Great. Hope that clears up those questions. Yeah, just going to end it there because I can keep going, and everyone's got an evening to get to. As yeah, I need to go eat, for example. But hopefully, yeah, that I mean, it's so hard to go into a good amount of detail about yeah such a big wide topic and to give you like a taster of what nutrition can be all about. But hopefully that gets you at least thinking. I think main things for you to think about are am I eating differently on my bigger days? Am I eating more on the days where I'm working harder? If not, where can I put more fuel into that day? So can I get it before training, whether that's through a snack, whether that's through a bigger meal with your last meal before that training session? And can I recover well with quite a big meal afterwards as well? So think about those fueling windows. Um, and if we're doing competition timelines, think about that 3.5 hours window beforehand, and how we can structure that a little bit better to make sure that we're competing at our best. But yeah, hopefully that helped somewhat. But yeah, happy to take any questions if you've got any at the moment. And I'm going to stop sharing so I can actually see everyone. There we go.
Cool. Thanks, Ollie. Ollie, quick one on the creatine. I know a few of the guys have spoken with me about they're competing and the creatine makes them feel really can make them feel bloated or digestively make them feel a bit uncomfortable or make that obviously it has an element of weight gain to it. What would you say to those guys who are worried about the weight gain of it, but sort of the pros versus the cons?
Yeah, I think unless you're in a weight restricted sport, I really wouldn't worry about sort of the weight element there. So not everyone's a responder. You've got responders and non-responders, so it's not always guaranteed that you will gain that weight. And it's only purely water weight that goes into the muscles. So actually, it makes you look a lot better, if anything. So the benefits definitely outweigh any negatives of creatine monohydrate. If they do notice any sort of like gut issues, I guess just try to work out the timing around their training a little bit so they give themselves plenty of time to avoid that basically. But yeah, I think everyone should be on it.
Perfect.